Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of Minexco, I want to thank you, the Natural Resource Forum, for inviting us here today. Minexco is a relatively new company, but it's been doing quite a few interesting things in the last 2.5 years. This is a brief summary on what it is I'm going to be telling you. I follow the US Army approach, so I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you it, then I'll tell you what I've told you. So we've started this company 2.5 years ago. It's focused on West Africa deep water, low-risk, high-materiality assets. And we have, in that period of time, since starting, putting wheels down in Ghana, starting to look at acreage, we've acquired 2 assets. We signed an asset in Sierra Leone 1.5 years ago. And on the 24th of January this year, we finally signed a deal in Ghana securing the South Deepwater Tano asset, which we consider to be something of a jewel of our crown. This is a field, and we'll go into a bit more technical detail on this shortly, that offsets not just the Jubilee complex, but also the discoveries which you've heard Stuart referring to at the amazing period in his career when he was making 7 out of 7 discoveries for Hess, even immediately to the north of our South Deepwater Tano Block. We're very proud and thankful to him because it makes our job easier. It was quite by coincidence because we had nothing to do with determining where Hess was drilling, obviously. The interesting thing that, apart from the technical attributes, is the structure that we put together in order to get this block in Ghana, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, because we see it as a solution to a growing political problem, or rather a political problem that's been there since time immemorial, about operating in other people's countries and the ownership of assets. And the last point is about materiality. I've referred already to the risk. The best place to look for oil and gas is, of course, next door to other oil and gas. We also have tried to acquire assets where we can see very material upside. And we, late last year, finally got 2 competent persons reports signed off by Netherland Sewell. Netherland Sewell, in our estimation at least, is one of the most conservative competent persons, and they also have the expertise in this region as well, having been competent person for Cosmos in the Jubilee complex. And in the case of South Deepwater Tano, they've attributed to a potential in excess of 4 billion barrels unrisked. So that's what we're going to be looking at. This is the geography of the region. You've seen from Stuart's talk far more impressive spreads, but we've acquired just 2 assets in that period of 2.5 years, and both of them meet those criteria that we have set ourselves, that is of low risk, offsetting other discoveries, materiality in terms of being subgiant to the supergiant category, and in deep water. I want to explore this a bit more detail. Throughout my career in the oil business, there have always been frontiers, and I particularly remember the frontier that was the political frontier, if you like, of the Soviet Union. The frontier that we've been confronting is that of water depth. And it wasn't long ago at the beginning of my career that deep water was a couple of 100 feet. And now, as you heard Stuart talking, people are now drilling routinely, perhaps not routinely at least, but they're drilling in greater than 3 kilometers, and fields are now being developed in depths of 2 3/4 to 3 kilometers. So it's a frontier that is being pushed back. And it's being pushed back not just by technology, but also by economics. We've been looking, because we've just signed this contract in Ghana, at rig availability. And some rig rates are coming down surprisingly low. And you've heard Stuart mention some of the impressive cost reductions and savings that can be done by virtue of the fact that in this part of the West African margin, there are really no other drilling issues apart from water depth. There's no pressure issue, there's no sloughing, no sulfur, nothing like that. So it's actually straightforward drilling. And you can drill these wells in 20, 30 days, and if you get a good rig rate, then you can keep the costs down that way. Let me go back to this slide here. Here you'll see what Minexco has done since we started off in mid-2011. It's a very short period of time, and it's worth emphasizing the point. This is thanks to the company being private. It's been privately funded with a few injections from very sophisticated investors, mostly in Canada, coming in and helping us once we've achieved the objectives that we set ourselves. We also like to do what Stuart has mentioned. We like to under-promise and over-deliver. So we don't go looking for even modest amounts of capital until we've actually gone and got something ready for that capital to be spent on. I'm not a great believer in going out and getting a pool of cash to go and do things. Those days, I'm glad to say, are long since gone. So the key events that we've really clocked up are the signature of these two contracts, both won in competitive situations, the competitive tender in Sierra Leone, and also this rather more discrete event that happened in Ghana, where we were whittled down to a short list of 3 companies. And we eventually, through various political changes, we acquired and signed this contract on the 24th of January. The management team has been assembled. The owner of the company is here with us today, Mr. Hecht. But what we're doing now is populating a board ready for when the time is right, and maybe the time won't be right, but a listing at some time in the future. Lord Richard Risby is our non-executive chairman, and we've been joined by a group of Norwegian entrepreneurs and engineers who've set up the company called AGR. And I'll come on to describe, when we look at Ghana in more detail, the components they brought to the company in terms of that technical expertise, operational capacity, but also increasingly now in terms of capital. Sverre Skogen is bringing capital into the company as well. Myself and Mark Ammonius, we are the 2 G&G guys, operations. We're running the pre-drilling operations, and Atle Andersen and Per Inge Ramsen, they're the guys from Norway who are going to be putting together the drilling program and running it. It's worth making the point now and in a moment that these Norwegians have been drilling through the AGR vehicle hundreds of wells for operators all over the world. When you hear about our friends from Ophir, for example, or Hyperdynamics, or even Statoil drilling wells, it's very often, especially in the case of small companies, a company like that, AGR is actually doing the drilling for them. They describe themselves as being the operator's operator, and now Minexco and AGR are working more closely together to form a seamless unit so that when we come to operate and drill in Ghana, we have the full functionality necessary. Let's look into this in a bit more detail. This block, I'll locate it here, is outlined in red. So it's this thing here. It's on the maritime frontier with Côte d'Ivoire. There's the Ghanaian coast. And outlined in red is the Jubilee complex. Now, I've been to the field, as I'm sure people like Stuart have as well, and oil was first found on the Ghanaian coast over 100 years ago. The oil seeps there, and wells were drilled 100 years ago. Then the paradigm moved out to these shallow water fields here, which extended into Côte d'Ivoire, which are structural, complex reservoirs, and not that particularly exciting. And of course, the huge game changer was the discovery of the Jubilee complex as a stratigraphic trap. And the key technological issue here has always been 3D, where you have high-quality 3D seismic, you can start looking for these things. But again, as Stuart has mentioned, if you don't have the right geological model, then you're going to get it wrong. And we're now learning, again, as Stuart has already said, that the further out you go into a more distal environment, the better the reservoir quality is, and the better the sealing is to some of these traps. And hence, this extraordinary success rate in the Hess acreage, and so we hope in our acreage adjoining it. In this slide here, you can see that the acreage that we have acquired comes with modern 3D seismic on it, acquired by a Norwegian group through the CGG contractor in 2009. And this is extraordinary data. I'll show some of it in a moment. But it enabled us to establish, at least to our own satisfaction, and then to Netherlands Sewell at least, that we were looking at very material prospects involving low risk. I said I'd come on to discuss the model that we've put together. When we first started talking to the Ghanaians 2.5 years ago about what it is they wanted, they weren't particularly interested in becoming a yet another passive interest in another successful well. That wasn't what they were looking for. They wanted to find a way of being coached, of being brought on, and building up their own capacity and becoming another Sonangol or Braspetro or Sonatrach, something like that. So what we have done is, by virtue of our small size, turn that to our advantage, and by forming this joint venture with AGR, we tick all the boxes in terms of the technical, the managerial capacity, but because we're small, we were able to convince the GNPC that we would indeed bring them on, that we would indeed nurture them and bring them into a technical operational capacity. And that's written into the contract, and one of the things that we're going to be doing as early as next week is starting the skills assessment process in GNPC, finding out precisely what has to be done to get these individuals who are extremely capable and very well educated and very intelligent, how we can bring them on so when the time comes, and it's all stipulated in the contract, they will actually be running things. It's worth pointing out, though, it won't actually change the structure in terms of the shareholding of this going forward. This is a quick summary of the outcome of the competent persons report by Netherlands Sewell. The really big numbers there are over 4 billion barrels of prospective oil in place, unrisked. We had some interesting discussions. It's worth outlining this to financial people as well as technical people, the issue of risk. We all have to assess risk in oil and exploration. It can be political, it can be operational. In the case of this type of thing, we had an interesting debate about whether or not we should be attributing a success rate that is akin to what Hess recorded in their acreage. And our advisors, our competent persons, were very reluctant to attribute a geological success rate anything much above 1 in 4, that being, if you like, the historical success rate. So there's a very interesting discussion to be had here. Exploration has an unjust record, in my view, being an explorer, of being a recipe for failure, and sometimes you occasionally get successes. But if you choose your acreage that's offset to known discoveries, if you have high-quality data, and you really are focused on what it is you're doing, then I would argue strongly that you can get a far better success ratio than 1 in 4. Well, let's see what happens. This is a map that was generated late last year by Netherlands Sewell, and it concurs exactly with what we've been doing internally. This is a structure map on the top Turonian, which is the principal producing horizon, so we gather in the Pecan discovery, which is just a short distance north of our acreage, and this big discovery made by the Hess, which Stuart has referred to. The green colors and the orange colors there, the structure, and the outlines in blue are some of the prospects that Netherlands Sewell, not ourselves, but Netherlands Sewell believe are there. And the ABC cluster of prospects clearly lies on trend to the Pecan discovery, though we can't actually relate it more than that. There are other prospects there, and in the H and F prospects in the bottom right-hand corner are some meandering channels with amplitudes that clearly look as if they could be analogues of the Jubilee field as well. So on the basis of that map, we were very happy to proceed thinking about drilling our 2 wells, which is our drilling obligation on this contract area, drilling these 2 wells back to back, because they would both be located, one on the ABC complex, a possible extension of the Pecan field, and also on the H and F prospects being something completely different. And there wouldn't be any need, therefore, to evaluate results between drilling. And we're currently scheduling, looking at schedules, I should say, to start drilling these prospects middle of next year. This is from the public domain from Hess, and it merely reinforces, I wasn't aware that Stuart was going to do such a great job for us, some of the amazing outcomes that were found in the Hess acreage. And there you can see the net pay of the Pecan well being 245 feet in the Turonian. And this is the model that we've been working with. It's interesting because geologists in this business really can't talk too openly to each other on the basis of what it is they believe is the model. But we're all coming together to have the same view, that we no longer want to be looking up here in this part of the system for the reasons that Stuart mentioned, but out here. And our model is that the acreage that we're looking at, and indeed in the southern part of the Hess acreage, is out there in a more distal location with the sands banked up against the Romanche High, which was an amazing structure that was been moving through geological time. To give you a look at some seismic, this is one of the clusters of prospects in the AB area, which we believe may well be along trend from Pecan. And the interesting thing about this is it's not just a stratigraphic trap. Underneath that, below the blue horizon, the pale blue horizon, you can see there's structure there as well. So we view this as being structure-enhanced stratigraphic trapping mechanism, which further reduces the risk, at least in our estimation. I wanted to show you this because when I saw this on my first visit to the data room, I couldn't believe my eyes. I haven't seen structures like this on the West African margin before, and we still really don't know what they are. They're some type of an inversion feature. They could be transbrechial pop-ups. They may even involve some salt or possibly shale diapirs. Very curious structures. But if you look back at this map here, you can see that these are found in this region here, and they are related to the structural inversion which lies underneath this cluster of prospects here. That's enough geology, otherwise you'll want to change career. Oh, I can show you this. This is the channel system from the southeast of the block, and we know nothing about this. We have no well to tie into it, but certainly in terms of the amplitudes that we can see, this looks very intriguing, and it looks just like Jubilee. Doesn't mean there's going to be hydrocarbon in it, but in terms of the prospects, it looks very, the risk, it looks very attractive, and the volumetrics would be there with it as well. And here you can see the seismic line through those fields. When we first saw them, we weren't quite sure what these features, for example, here, these high amplitude events are, until we started looking at them in 3D, and this then becomes a meandering channel in and out of the plane. So if you can imagine a channel going in here and coming back out here and then running along here. You have to think in 3 dimensions to do what I do. And a few more seismic lines, well, we can talk about those later. Into Sierra Leone, the license was acquired 1.5 years ago in competitive tender. It was the first time that the Sierra Leonean government had done this, and they've learnt a lot through the process. But it's interesting, not just politically, but geologically, we see Sierra Leone being a few years behind Ghana on its learning curve of how to run the oil business, but also in terms of the geology, as I'll show you in a moment, we see great similarities between what we have and in Sierra Leone and what we have in Ghana. We have a non-drilling commitment on this acreage, and we are roughly halfway through our program and are going to be shooting seismic, 3D seismic later in this year. This is the location of the block. It's offsetting Anadarko's discoveries. We're not quite sure what happened in the Lukoil well yet. It's still very much a tight well. As I'll show you in a moment, and the seismic that we have, which is limited only to around about 2,500 line kilometers of 2D, that we do have a lot of very interesting leads, and because they're leads, they have a different risk category, if you like. They're not yet prospects. And in that regard, Netherlands Sewell was happy to give us big numbers, but they don't mean very, very much yet. Those numbers will come down as we acquire 3D. This is what I wanted to show you. These are some of the channels that you can see on 2D. These are turbidite channels here, probably in the Turonian as well, maybe slightly older, and in here as well. And this is our provisional map of how these channels that I haven't shown how they extend down from Anadarko's acreage, but each one of those 3 channels outlined in white can be traced back to the channels that have been drilled by Anadarko. So we seem to be in the right address here. What I haven't discussed here is water depth. This acreage is in water depths of over 3 kilometers, and the shallowest prospects that we could be considering would probably be in water depths of around about 3.2 kilometers. So much more so than in the case of Ghana, we'd be very much dependent on what our neighbors are planning to do, and in this frontier that I've been speaking about, the technological frontier of drilling in deep water. So we have to wait and see what happens here. We're in no rush to drill. We have no requirement to drill, probably if we convert this license to a drilling obligation, not for another 2 years. Here's our work program going forward. We're going to be doing a lot of preparations leading up to the drilling of next year, so far as Ghana is concerned. The seismic for Sierra Leone we're going to be shot later this year, early next year, and we'll probably have the same vessel shooting some seismic on the small part of the Ghana block that has no 3D on it. But you can see there we're plainly aiming to be drilling in the middle of next year. So you've seen how with the total commitment of private capital to backing something and having a clear vision of what was needed to be achieved, we've gone out and built an oil company in 2.5 years, admittedly with only 2 assets, but 2 assets that are both low risk and high quality in terms of the materiality and the reserve potential they offer. And we're very fortunate that events have moved in parallel. Operations in the Hess acres have shown that we are definitely in the right address, and that the risks that might be associated from a geological point of view at least are much lower than might otherwise have been thought. And also by rig rates coming down, that the costs also can be managed as well. We're very also glad to see what Netherlands Sewell have been very happy to attribute to this early stage exploration, admittedly, in terms of the potential as a third-party verification. Thank you very much indeed. That's what I have to say.